Hello students, welcome to EasyElimu, Learning Simplified. I'm your teacher, Mr. Stanley Ombogu. So on to today's summary of Fathers of Nations, that is by Paul B. Vita. Chapter 5 summary, to be specific. We are going to look at the episodes that we have in chapter 5. So remember, we have looked at some of the episodes that we have in the previous chapters. So before we look at the episodes that we have in chapter 5, dear students, let us remind ourselves about the episodes that we came across in chapter 4 of this wonderful novel, Fathers of Nations. So in chapter 4, we were able to look at three major episodes. And again, remember chapter 4 talked about Mrs. Fiona Mackenzie. So this after leaving Simont Hotel, she received a call from her boss, and she was required to be at the office. So some of the episodes that we came across in chapter 4, dear students, was number 1, the traffic inconvenience. This is now when Mrs. Fiona Mackenzie is trying to get back to the office after receiving a call from the boss. Then the second episode that we also identified in the chapter, that is chapter 4, was about Miss Fiona Mackenzie's new assignment at VOA, that is the Voice of America. So remember, Mrs. Fiona Mackenzie, worked with the Gambia News, but she is now on a 2-year loan and currently assigned or given a role in the VOA under the chief of the bureau, that is Mr. Manley. So the last episode in chapter 4 is about Mrs. Fiona Mackenzie being saved by Dr. Abiola Afolabi. That is after she is accosted by a man that is by the name Leo, or we can talk about the nickname is Leo, but again the real name, we are told that the real name is so his real name, dear students, just a minute. So the real name was the Liberian Mullah, the Liberian Mullah. Sorry for that. So about chapter 5 summary, chapter 5 talks about Dr. Abiola Afolabi. So remember, Dr. Abiola Afolabi was a lecturer at Ibadan University in Nigeria. So before being invited to Banjul, so Dr. Afolabi was invited. So he was also to attend the summit under the invitation of the presidents. So he is to serve as an advisor to the summit. So earlier on, he was invited to Washington by the Foundation of Democratic Rule to give a keynote address at an annual conference. So some of the episodes that we are going to look at in this chapter is number 1, the plight of old people. We have got the second episode, that is Dr. Afolabi's childlessness. Then the third episode is Dr. Afolabi meeting Mr. Tad Longway. So Mr. Tad Longway, dear students, is a director of a special project. So he's working with AGDA. So AGDA is the Agency for Governance and Development in Africa, or of Africa. Then the third episode is Dr. Folabi finally meeting or getting, I think I've mentioned that, sorry. The last episode in this chapter is Pamela leaving Dr. Abiola Afolabi. So Dr. Abiola Afolabi is married, but now the wife, that is Pamela, finally calls it a quit. So on to the first episode in this chapter, that is the plight of old people. So Dr. Afolabi, just like I had mentioned, has a wife called Pamela. Pamela is from Boston, Massachusetts. So Pamela has not seen her father for 6 years, and the couple gets a chance to travel to Boston to see Pamela's father. This after Dr. Afolabi's invitation to Washington in that annual uh, conference. So Dr. Afolabi is out, to reveal this after the long journey, a lot of traveling. So he's out to get some fresh air, and he notices that Americans, or rather American citizens, sorry, uh, have longer lifespan with the aged living alone in their homes. So some of these are, aged people uh, joined contemporaries in old people's homes, as majority were empty of relatives, meaning that they completely were alone, no relatives to look after them. Sorry, generally, no caregiver and everything. So uh, he was at a store to buy a razor that we are told he bought for $5.23. So this is where he meets the lonely father-in-law, that is Pamela's father. So later, Dr. Afolabi rejoins Pamela at home and remembers her father through a watch-like gadget that is able to monitor blood pressure and his movements. So remember, in the dialogue that was shared between uh, Pamela's father and the woman who was at the cashier, talked. The conversation was all about the gadget, like the watch like gadget. So uh, Dr. Folabi's father-in-law showed the gadget to this woman, and he had got a number of things to say about or to testify about the gadget, but the woman had no time because she's at work. So uh, Dr. Abiola Folabi remembers all these. So, from the occurrence at the store, it is clear that is from the observance that Dr. Abiola was able to get from the store. It is clear that all people are desperate for attention. And again, looking at the kind of conversation that the old man had with the woman who was the cashier. Then on to the next episode, that is Dr. Afolabi's childlessness. So remember, dear students, Dr. Abiola has a wife that is by the name Pamela, who is Scottish. So Dr. Abiola has always wanted two children of his own. But again, Pamela also wants children, but she feels like Africa already, has too many children that so they can easily adapt, maybe two. So in this episode, Dr. Afolabi sees a biracial toddler. So biracial toddler is, it's like a child from two races. So half black and half white. So this biracial toddler wobble away from the mother to go feed street pigeons. This got him thinking about having kids, looking at the toddler's fractions. That is, Dr. Abiola thought that if he had a wife, if he had a child or rather children with Pamela, then uh, his children would probably have the same fractions as the toddlers. So Dr. Afolabi, just like I had said, wanted two children of his own, and Pamela wanted two, but adopted ones. So uh, on to the next episode in this chapter is about Dr. Afolabi meeting Tad Longway. So uh, Dr. Afolabi and Pamela are now leaving Washington. So on a flight back to Nigeria. So remember, Dr. Afolabi is a Nigerian. So on a flight back to Nigeria from Washington, Dr. Afolabi meets Tad Longway. So Tad Longway, remember, is the Director of Special Projects at the Agency for Governance and Development of Africa. So Mr. Tad Longway insists on traveling next to Dr. Afolabi, and Pamela, that is the wife, Dr. Afolabi's wife, is forced to trade seats with him in economy class. So the next thing in this episode is that Mr. Longway and Dr. Afolabi exchange pleasantries and they establish contacts. So he then tells Dr. Afolabi that Africans are unhappy with the present state that has two new arrivals, which are, so the two new arrivals that Mr. Tad Longway is talking about is number one, corruption, and the second one is impunity. So, dear students, Dr. Afolabi confirms that he is invited by the heads of state at the summit to give his reviews about Way Omega. So up to this point, dear students, I want to assume, or I want to be sure that we are all aware of the two documents, that is the Way Omega document and the Path Alpha, that is arrival strategy. So in his confirmation, so he says that he's invited to give his views about Way Omega. So Mr. Longway then tells him about Path Alpha, which, according to Agda, is a better alternative, that is as compared to Way Omega. So Dr. Afolabi is told that Agda would like him to guide 4 Path Alpha observers to the summit. Mr. Longway hands Dr. Afolabi a Path Alpha document to go through, that is, before making a decision. So Dr. Afolabi is later advised by Mr. Longway, Mr. Tad Longway, not to defect from Way Omega, because that will be the entry point for what? For the Path Alpha strategy, dear students. Look at how interesting that is. Then the last episode in this chapter is about Pamela leaving, or rather, Pamela calling it a quit. So Pamela leaves Dr. Abiola Afolabi. So that is, remember in the previous episode, they were on their way to Nigeria from Washington. So the couple arrives home from Washington. So the houseboy, they had a houseboy by the name Isa. So Isa pleads with Pamela not to enter into her room because there was an intruder that she won't like to see. So Dr. Afolabi threatens to punish Isa if at all he fails to reveal who is in the house. So Pamela is shocked by the events that take place in the house. That is when Dr. Abiola's cousin by the name Femi surfaces and the two converse. They talk in Yoruba. That is, they converse in Yoruba. So Femi had brought his cousin a second wife. So allegedly, it was that Pamela could not have children of her own. So Femi has brought a second wife. But Dr. Afolabi protests that he doesn't need another wife. So Pamela gets out and comes back with a broomstick. So she chases Nimbo, that is the young girl brought by Femi, who is Abiola's cousin. So this young girl was found, or she found this young girl in a matrimonial bed. What would you do? What would you do? That is the question. What would you do? So Pamela insists that Femi and Nimbo must leave the house, but the husband, that is Dr. Abiola, does nothing about this, claiming that that is family. Nimbo, sorry, not Nimbo, but Leo is a cousin, so they cannot leave. They cannot leave. So Femi is, remember, Femi is Dr. Afolabi's cousin. not Leo, sorry. Dear students, we are talking about uh, a character by the name Femi. I think in my earlier statements, I mentioned Leo. So we are talking about Femi. Sorry about that. So because Femi is Dr. Abiola's cousin, so he cannot let them leave at that time. So Pamela leaves immediately that night with a suitcase unpacked. Then a week later, she calls her husband and informs him that she filed for a divorce. So Pamela calls it a quit. And that is the last episode in this chapter. Thank you for watching. Keep it EasyElimu, where learning is simplified. Bye.